we're back. My name is Brandon Drumm. I'm here with Parker Thune. This is the second rendition of the OU Insider YouTube Live. We were talking about the OU basketball team without CJ Nolan today, without Elijah Harkless today, giving up a big lead, going into overtime. Fans either were going to pee or leaving. We don't know. But one way or the other, Oklahoma came out on top. And we were talking about Marvin Johnson. Why does he not get more PT? Because when he plays, things happen.
And it's because he had a high ankle sprain in the last 3-4 weeks. So he's actually been sitting out injured for the vast majority of conference play. I think the last full game he played would have been that victory over West Virginia in late January. So they needed him today in a big way because CJ Nolan had been banged up. He was inactive for Oklahoma. And for the entirety of that 45 minutes of basketball, Brandon, Oklahoma only used 8 total players, 7 after Jacob Groves fouled out with about 7 minutes remaining. So Porter Moser said it in postgame. His guys were gassed by the end of it. Both Jordan Goldwire and Yamoji Gibson played in excess of 40 minutes. So he was riding the horses till they dropped, and thankfully the Sooners had just enough juice to get what is very much a season-saving victory.
Well, like you were saying, they do have still a chance to make it to the NCAA tournament. They look like they're an NIT team. What are the games that they have? What are the games left remaining on the schedule?
So they've got West Virginia at home midweek next week. And the next weekend, they go to Kansas State. Keep in mind, they haven't won in Bramlage Coliseum since 2012, which is kind of hard to believe, but that is the case. It has been a decade since they went to Manhattan and beat the Wildcats. So if they win those 2 games, you close the regular season at 17-14. You would be at that point, I believe, 7-11 in Big 12 play. And in the deepest league in America, that's probably good enough to get you into the tournament, provided you win one in the conference tournament. So to me, Oklahoma is still very much alive and kicking in the race for a berth in March Madness and a berth in the field of 68. But they have to win 3 more victories. Right now, the Razors' edge to me is that over under 17.5 wins. If Oklahoma gets that 18th win, which would mean 2 wins to close the regular season plus 1 win in the Big 12 tournament, to me, you're in the tournament as an at-large with 18 wins. If you only have 17, if you're sitting there at 17-15, then you're in dicey territory, and I couldn't favor Oklahoma at that point to earn an at-large berth with some of the programs that they'll be going up against there on the bubble.
Well, my team to start the season. I know they brought in some good pieces. I think we both did after we saw the start of the season, but things just started to fall apart very, very quickly in the middle of December, January, and then they kind of got back up, made a little bit of run. Now they can't seem to find themselves once again. Do you chalk this up to, I think everybody needs to remember that Porter Moser had to bring in 9-10 transfers, because I think he only had 5 guys that actually on the roster last year.
4
on the team.
So yeah, he brought 4. In 4. 9 new players.
Look, do you think that this has a lot to do with these teams have been through the system? Most other teams have been through the system with their coach for a long period of time, and or they're more experienced. I know Oklahoma's experienced, but they're not experienced together. And when you just kind of throw everybody in, they didn't get a really long off season together. Do you kind of chalk it up to, cohesiveness as the season went along?
I don't know if it has as much to do with cohesiveness as it has to do with just not having that dude, right? Yeah. Oklahoma hasn't really had that dude since Trae Young. And Austin Reeves showed flashes of being that guy for Oklahoma, but I think what the Sooners lack is a finisher. Somebody that you can put the ball in their hands in late game situations. He's going to go and get the job done. He's going to get you a crucial bucket. The Sooners' strength is that they're very balanced offensively, but that's only a strength until you get to a late game situation like that, and you really, really need somebody that can take over. And that, to me, is the Sooners' glaring weakness, is just the fact that they don't have an elite scorer. And I know that elite scorers are a lot more difficult to come by at the collegiate level. You know, it's a lot easier said than done to just go and get an elite scorer. But to me, that's one thing that Oklahoma had in Buddy Hield, they had in Trey Young, and for a while there, they had it in Austin Reeves. That guy just hasn't really been there for Oklahoma this season, at least not on a consistent basis. You've seen some nice performances from Umoja Gibson. You've seen some nice performances from Jordan Goldwire. Obviously, the loss of Elijah Harkless hurts, but to me, that is what's held them back. That, and also just the reality, and we've talked about it on the podcast and elsewhere, Brandon, that Tanner Groves just isn't a Big 12 5. No, he was a great 5 in the Big Sky. He's a decidedly average to above average 5 in the Big 12, but he's not a guy that physically is capable of going toe-to-toe in the paint with the likes of a David McCormick, for instance, at Kansas, the elite bigs.
He looks like a 40-year-old man.
And look, Tanner Groves is a great basketball player. He can shoot the ball. He can drive. There's a lot of things that he can do for your program. But in terms of what you yield by having him on the opponent's 5, when you're on the defensive end of the court, to me, that's where the Sooners have a vulnerability. And Ethan Shagwa has come on strong here late in the stages of this season. But take, for example, today and Musa Cisse for Oklahoma State. That was the guy that was going to get whatever he wanted. And he did down the stretch. He was the one that came up with the tying bucket to send the game into overtime. When you have a 7-footer on the other side of the court and a guy that can do it all down low like Musa Cisse can, that's where you start to have your concerns about how the likes of a Tanner Groves or an Ethan Shagwa is going to hold up. So Oklahoma has to compensate for their shortcomings in the paint with excellent guard play. And I think that's become much more difficult for Oklahoma since they lost Elijah Harkless to injury, because what Elijah Harkless provided in the backcourt, both offensively and defensively, you can't really replace.
Specifically defensively, him and Goldwire together as a tandem were just nasty on the defensive end. And when you have to rely, I mean, I don't know, Umoja Gibson on the defensive end, he was, last year to start the season, and I don't know if you remember this, he had really quick hands there for a little bit. And it's almost like he's decided he's going to focus on offense more than he does defense, because he doesn't really have that nastiness about him that he did when he first came over last year through the transfer portal. So I don't know. They have to go get somebody. I know they've got 2 really solid players on the recruiting trail signed up with them. You would have to pronounce the names because I'm going to totally butcher both of them.
Milos Uzan and Otega Uwe.
There you go. And y'all, people listening, can see why I had Parker do it. Look, both those guys are fantastic players. Both top 125 players in the country. They're huge pickups for Porter Moser. Now they've got to go grab somebody that can score out of the portal. Like you said, I think that is what is lacking, and or a big or a 4 that can really dominate down low. One of the two has got to happen, because if they don't, we're going to be rinse, wash, repeat, watching the same thing happen next year. I think that's not to say that Groves can't get stronger, but he's just not really built for muscle.
No. And who had an outstanding game today on the defensive end of the court was Jalen Hill, as well as Marvin Johnson. Yeah. Both those guys came up huge for Oklahoma on the defensive side when it really counted. And Marvin Johnson in particular was massive in overtime.
Does Marvin Johnson get an extra year back next year?
No, he's done. He's one of the guys that's going to be finished.
That's a shame. That's such a shame. But number 2, I was going to say, I think if somebody's going to be that guy next year to be able to score and do things with as versatile as Jalen Hill is, I think he could be that dude. I really do.
And I think CJ Nolan has a ton of potential to be that guy too.
CJ
Nolan
he
has
could be
a
a
chance
good
to be
fullback too if he wanted to.
Oh man, he's built like he should be playing linebacker for Brent Venables. I'll tell you that.
No doubt.
But
No
Brandon,
doubt.
let's give the folks what they came for. You are down there in the state
what
of
is
Georgia
this?
right now.
Yeah.
Well, maybe they'll be coming for basketball a week from now if we're talking about
we're
the
bearing
Sooners'
the lead.
third straight victory over Kansas State, and they're all of a sudden right back in the picture for an NCAA tournament berth. But for now, people are curious to know what's going on in the world of recruiting. And with you having been down there for the last couple of weeks in the state of Florida and most recently the state of Georgia, what are some highlights that you can share from your travels?
Well, first and foremost, I think the biggest highlight is I would pick up my camera and show everybody, but I'm staying right next to the Avengers, the Avengers headquarters in the movie, which I'm pretty stoked about. And I had to show Parker the other day when I was like, dude, I called him right when I got in the room. I was like, dude, you got to check this out. And I chose the hotel for that very reason, by the way. It's really cool. They actually, the track that Tony Stark came down, everything is right here. It's really neat. I'm just pretty stoked about it. Anyways, I digress. As far as the recruiting goes, look, the vibe down here is that the staff that Oklahoma currently has on the football within the football program, the coaches, they're going to be able to recruit at a very high level in the Southeast, whether it's Florida, Georgia, South Carolina, Alabama, Tennessee. Look, I was talking. I'm super pessimistic about things, and people on the board the other day were like, "Are you ever think you feel good about anybody?" Because I wasn't like, I'm not there yet. I'm not there yet. I don't know. I'm going to do some more digging on it. Or I don't feel that confident in certain things. And it kind of wears on people that I'm the pessimistic type because I've got to be really sure if I'm going to do things. I'm talking to a couple of reporters down there in Florida and up here in Georgia. And I'm like, man, look, I'm down here because Oklahoma offered all these guys. I don't really know what is going to happen with them on the recruiting trail. And one of the most respected guys, I'm not going to name him, turns to me and says, dude, like OU is going to pull a couple of guys that they shouldn't out of Alabama. They're going to pull 4 or 5 guys out of Georgia, 5 or 6 out of Florida that they normally wouldn't because of the connections that the new staff has down in this region and the fact that Oklahoma had already built up momentum in the Southeast with the previous staff, with the likes of Jamar Kane, Calvin Thibodeau, the list goes on. And Venables' staff is going to piggyback off that, and you're seeing it. I go down, I visit Vic Burley. He's cousins with Nick Easton, the Clemson's defensive line coach, formerly at Auburn. They're distant cousins. So I asked him, I said, man, look, are you going to Clemson? He was leaning towards Clemson with Todd Bates. So the second Todd Bates came over to Oklahoma kind of threw themselves into the fray. Now, do I think Oklahoma is going to end up with Vic Burley? No, but I think there's a good chance that Oklahoma gets a visit out of him. He hasn't set one up yet, but I wouldn't be shocked if April or June you don't see Vic Burley on campus. I just visited with Caden McDonald, went out there today, 4-star defensive tackle out of North Gwinnett. Like North Gwinnett, that is where Ted Roof's from. Caden McDonald's older brother's best friend is Trey Morrison. His little league quarterback was Jackson Arnold. Jackson Arnold moved from Georgia to Texas and now is committed to Oklahoma. Brandon Hall was his brother's coach at Troy after he transferred from Iowa to Troy over the last few seasons. So the family is
four connections, yes. 4 direct connections to the University of Oklahoma.
And Todd Bates was recruiting him heavily before he left Clemson to Oklahoma. So when you add all those pieces up, Oklahoma's sitting pretty well there. I mean, Caden was talking to me about, hey, when I get there, because his mom was talking to him about, wanting to stay close to Norman. She asked me where the best place to stay. I said probably Bricktown or Norman, one or the other. She said she already got a place in Norman. And he said, Mom, you don't have to worry about driving back and forth because I'm going to stay with Trey. I'm going to hang out with Trey the whole time. So they're very, very close friends. And obviously that's his brother's best friend. So there is some solid connections for Oklahoma. And there's on top of that, his mom is from Western Arkansas. His grandma lives there and spends a lot of times, as he says, hitting up the Oklahoma casinos all the time. So there is a ton of connections there with the 4-star Georgia Preps defensive lineman. Uh, CJ Hurd likes Oklahoma a ton.
Yes, he
The
does.
4-star defensive back out of the 2024 defensive back out of Woodward High School. Um, KJ Bolden loves Oklahoma. He's going to be up there this weekend with Caden McDonald, who's visiting this weekend. Obviously, you have 5-star running back Richard Young, who he says, I promised DeMarco Murray I'm going to take it, and I'm getting up there this next weekend. Richard Young is very adamant. He does like Oklahoma a lot. He has a lot of family in Alabama. So the Crimson Tide's probably the leader there. I'm going to find out a lot tomorrow at the Under Armour camp, where I'm going to get to see everybody like 5-star defensive back Caden Downs, 4-star defensive lineman, trying to think here, Xavier McLeod, Keldrick Falk, name another 4-star defensive lineman out of Alabama for me off the top of your head, Parker. I'm trying to think.
Hunter Osborne, did you already say him?
Hunter Osborne's going to be there. I haven't named him. He will be there. So will I can't. All the Alabama guys outside of Peter Woods, I think, will be there. Jalen Mbakwe will be there. The defensive back out of Birmingham, 4-star defensive back out of Birmingham. Look, there is a ton of things. If you were an OU fan right now, T.A. Cunningham, all those guys, you should be very confident in the fact that this staff has a chance to really land some people. And I didn't even bring up Peyton Kirkland, 4-star offensive lineman out of Orlando, who's visiting Oklahoma on June 3rd, or Derek LeBlanc, 5-star defensive lineman, 2023 defensive lineman out of Kissimmee Osceola High School, who's going to spend 4 days on his unofficial once again in Norman. And Caden McDonald said he's going to spend 3 or 4 days there as well. So this is just big time. And I know people want to know about Overton. Look, I have a call in with his coach. I'm going to talk with him again about Overton, try to get a better feel for it. Overton's not really doing interviews anymore. He's not really wanting to talk to media. So I'm having to go through sources and stuff like that. What I can tell you right now is that it's kind of split down here when you talk to people that know the family and kind of have a vibe for what's going on. There's a lot of people that think A&M, a lot of people that think Oklahoma. Those are the two teams. Nobody really expects Georgia. Nobody expects Oregon. Nobody expects, I think, who was the other one? Ohio State? Was that the other one that was in there?
I think it was. No, Alabama.
Yeah, it was Ohio State. I thought it was Ohio State.
Alabama? Okay.
Yeah, I think Alabama wasn't on there because I think that was shocking. Alabama wasn't on the five. Needs to say it's really a 3-team race. It's George. I would probably say I don't know that George is going to be able to make room for him and his brother. I was told that if A&M was going to do it, what they'll do is they'll bring his brother in. He'll pay for his schooling during the summer, and then they'll sign him in September, and he'll go towards the 2024 class instead of the 2023 class. So, or the 2023 class instead of the 2022 class, excuse me. So there's ways A&M can do it without offering his brother right now. Now, do they want to do it? Do they feel like they have a better shot at coming to Oklahoma and playing together with the amount of players that Oklahoma's already had leave or heading to the NFL or lost eligibility? I think those are things we're going to find out. And I don't know that we're really going to know much until Overton gets to campuses. I keep saying that, like, look, we can sit here and talk till we're blue in the face. We don't know anything until he takes visits, because nothing's going to change until then. They're still just going to talk to the coaches all the time. But when he takes those official visits, like he said he's going to in the month of March, things will change then. I did find out something quite interesting.
What's that?
Who's the recent quarterback in the portal?
With JT Daniels.
No. Think out west.
Oh, Jaden Daniels.
There you go. there's some buzz that Oklahoma is pursuing him.
Really?
Yeah. I don't know if I can confirm it or not, but
what do you mean you don't know if you can confirm it, Brandon?
The buzz I heard was they have at least reached out. I don't know if that's not really a story, but I mean,
that seems odd to me. Does it not seem odd to you?
It does, but reaching out doesn't really mean much. I think people need to understand that. Like if you just touch base with people, that doesn't mean much. So I'm not reporting that Oklahoma is like actively recruiting him. They have reached out to him at least touch base.
People have already tweeted it, Brandon.
I guarantee you, they've gone to the boards and they're like, "Oh, he said, well, no." That happens all the time. People reach out.
Contact though.
Yeah, I've been told they've been in contact. Yeah, from a pretty reliable source. Yep.
Okay. Well, that's an interesting little nugget there.
Mm-hmm. I just found that out there. But, yeah, that pretty much sums it up. I know everybody wants to kind of look. Next week, things are going to heat up. Heat a big way on the recruiting trail. From this point on, things have changed. And Parker and I, we both probably talked to the same person about this type of stuff. There's a high expectation for what Oklahoma is going to do moving forward on the recruiting trail. And they are not going to not overturn any stones. Like they're going to evaluate. They're going to be one of the most structured, most well-organized recruiting machines out there when it's all said and done. I can actively and confidently say that.
Yep.
Do you have anything you want to add?
Did you want me to speak?
Yeah, I'm done. I talked long enough, man.
It figured like you were building up to something there. Like
there's nothing I'm building up to anymore. Go for it.
Okay.
You're up.
No, but yeah, the reality is March 5th, which is a week from today, looms large as really the biggest recruiting event to date of the brief Brent Venables era. And we're going to have a full visitor list posted on OU Insider by tomorrow. And you're going to get to see all of the names that will be in town March 5th. We're in the process of confirming a whole bunch of additional names that'll be in town on March 26th. So here's what I do know. There aren't going to be any visitors on the 12th, the 19th. So those middle weekends in March going to be dead as far as recruiting visits are concerned, but it's those two dates.
I think David Stone is going to visit the 19th weekend. He says that's the only weekend he can do
it. Okay.
Yeah, I know that for a fact. He's told me he's going the 18th, 19th, the 20th, going to try to come in and hang out.
Okay. So there you go. But Oklahoma is gunning to have several dozen players on campus on the 5th, and then another several dozen on the 26th. The 5th is going to be primary 2023 players. The 26th, that's going to be primary 2024s. There will be a little bit of both sprinkled in. You know, on the 5th, there will be a few 24s that we've confirmed, and on the 26th, there will be a few 23s that we've confirmed.
Some big time 23s.
Yes. But for the most part, primarily, you're going to see 23s on the 5th, 24s on the 26th, and those are the big two recruiting weekends of the month of March for the Sooners. And that's ideally, Brandon, what gets the ball rolling for Oklahoma, specifically in the 2023 cycle, because now that you've got your quarterback in Jackson Arnold, and now that you've got a couple of guys in Josh Bates and Ashton Cozart that are very active on social media and trying to recruit their peers to Oklahoma, now you got a nucleus that you can build around. And the natural question is, who's next? Who's going to jump in the boat? And there are a few candidates. I think last week we talked about several of them. The name at the top of the list is probably Dylan Edwards. And those of you that are on the OU Insider VIP board have seen all of the crystal balls come in for Dylan Edwards over the last month or so in favor of the Sooners. That's recruitment in which Oklahoma has very much seized the bull by the horns. And you'd have to figure that if there was one guy that you had to peg in the 2023 class as the odds-on favorite to be the next to jump in the boat with Oklahoma, it would be Dylan Edwards. But You take a look at the visitors that are coming in town next week. You've got Caden Green, whom Oklahoma is in very strong standing with. You got a couple of guys from up in the Northeast, Musa Kane out of New Jersey. You got a couple of outstanding linebackers from Texas, Samaje Burrell and Darion Gillette. So there's talent. There's talent across the board. And a lot of these guys, Oklahoma is in a really good spot with at the moment. Now, it's tough to say that OU's the leader for any of these guys just because it's so early in the process. And a lot of these players didn't pick up offers from OU until anywhere from 6 to 8 weeks ago when Venables and his staff really got a chance to sit down and focus on the 2023 cycle and close the book on 2022. I guess they didn't really close the book on 2022, all things considered, until about 3 weeks ago on National Signing Day. But a lot of these guys have relatively new offers. For a lot of them, this is going to be their first trip to Oklahoma. And so it's very, very important that Oklahoma and the recruiting staff, the support staff that Brent Venables has assembled around him, make a strong initial impression, because for a lot of these guys, right, dead period lifts at the end of February. Come March, this is the first weekend where they're taking visits. This is their first opportunity to go anywhere. And so the fact that Oklahoma gets the first crack at them says a lot. And, you know, you ideally would like to have the last crack more so than the first crack, but the first crack means something for sure. And you have a chance to establish a lead very early on in the process in some of these recruitments where you're going to be going toe-to-toe with the likes of Texas and Texas A&M and LSU and Notre Dame and some of those traditional foes on the recruiting trail for the Sooners. So the 5th is going to be big. We'll have full coverage of it, and we'll do it all again on the 26th.
Yeah, it's massive. I think you named, a couple of guys. Obviously, Caden McDonald's going to be there. Richard Young, 5-star running back out of Lehigh, Florida. You named Samaje Burrell. You got Anthony White out of down there by Lubbock. You got Landon Hill, Edric Hill, Isaiah Mosey. There's a strong list of visitors, and look, that's not even the full list. Like, I think we've got like 15 guys right now, and I expect another 10 or so, 10 to 15 more guys to be there. And there's going to be some surprise guys. I mean, I wouldn't be shocked if Jacoby Johnson or somebody like that showed up again. I wouldn't be shocked if, a Micah Tees or I don't know, a By Job or somebody like that showed up. Look, everybody, Dylan Edwards is coming back, as you noted. That's a guy that we're watching very closely. Almost feels like that's getting closer and closer to being a done deal with him. Trying to think of a lot of other guys that Oklahoma is, would it shock you if, Jalen Hill surprisingly showed up?
Well, yes, it would, because I actually reported last night, Jalen Hill is going to Alabama next weekend.
There you go. Well, I assume he'll be at one of the weekends with Oklahoma, I'm sure.
You'd hope so, because it's been a minute since you got him on campus. And I think that's what I and many fans are apprehensive about right now with regard to the Jalen Hill situation is ostensibly, from everything we know and everything we hear, Brandon, Oklahoma's in a really good spot for that kid, the 5-star wideout out of Longview High School.
Actions more than words, man.
Exactly.
Yep.
And so if he's really as serious about Oklahoma as we are led to believe, then you got to get him back on campus. And if he doesn't show up to campus sometime this spring, that's when you kind of start to scratch your head a little bit and wonder if it's legit and wonder if that interest in Oklahoma is still as strong as it once was.
Right. No, I agree. Do I expect? I mean, I don't know that I would be shocked if maybe 2 or 3 guys committed. I mean, I feel like there's going to be one, but I would probably cap it at 3, as far as like the potential of how many commitments. I know everybody wants to ask about, well, who's going to do this or who's going to do that. I'm going to sit here and tell you, if David Stone makes it to Norman in March during his spring break, which is also during OU spring break, and I think obviously they'll be back on the back end of it, March, whatever. And if he doesn't, he already said if he doesn't come on that weekend, the last weekend of spring break, he's going to come in with his buddies from IMG, Jordan Johnson Rubel, Stacey Gage, Jaden Hardy, and the list goes on and on of guys that are going to be there on the 25th and 26th. So there is a good chance that Oklahoma ends up. I think the 26th is probably going to be the biggest weekend by far. And then following that is probably going to be the spring game. And then following that is probably going to be June 3rd through the 5th when Oklahoma is now set up for the Champion Barbecue. And I know somebody asked in the comments if there's going to be one of those. Absolutely. They're not tradition. That started with Stoops. And they're going to keep that tradition. That's something they're not going to deter away from. And I think right now Oklahoma is looking to keep everything that worked. You don't mess it. If it's not broke, don't fix. You keep it. And I fully expect them to pull out all the stops, the cars, all that stuff like they did with the previous regimes and stuff like that.
They're bringing the Lambos back, huh?
I'm sure they will. I don't know that as a fact, but why wouldn't you? If it works so well, why wouldn't you do it? If that's going to be, it's just for pictures and stuff. Anyways, it's kind of just, hey, look, this is what can happen if you come to Oklahoma and you become a star. Obviously, the players are going to be there, the NFL players, and we can probably sit here and tell you the spring game Baker Mayfield statue is pretty much on the docket there. So
bingo. By the way, June 3rd through the 5th. That's the weekend that we're
barbecue
for the I don't know what they're going to call it, but what has traditionally been Champion Barbecue. So.
I heard it was just going to be called Champion Barbecue.
Okay, well, great. I mean, if they don't want to change the branding, I suppose that
I don't know why you would, right? I mean, it's worked.
Yeah. No,
I think they're doing another one. I think in July as well, at the end of July. I think they're keeping the same kind of formula there, and I don't know why you wouldn't. It worked with Stoops, then it worked with Riley. I don't know why you would deter away from that at all. That's just my opinion. I don't know. What is your feel on that?
No, I agree. There's obviously elements that you want to keep in place, but to a certain extent, you do want to dissociate from the things that were affiliated with the Riley agenda in as much as you're able, but you don't want to lose the effectiveness of what has traditionally been a very, very impactful recruiting event for the Sooners. And so I'm interested to see how it all shakes out. I think it's one of those things where, we're sitting here on February 26th and we don't know exactly what it looks like. And odds are the folks in that building don't know exactly what it's going to look like yet. But as that continues to take shape, we'll have more and more details. And the June weekend is going to be big. You'd imagine it'll be just as big, if not bigger, come July. And one of the things that we talked about before on the live stream is the fact that Oklahoma is really tightening the recruiting calendar. It's not going to be the type of thing where they're hosting 3 official visitors here, 4 official visitors there every single weekend throughout the summer. No, you're going to have all those official visits concentrated on those weekends where Oklahoma is really making an event out of the recruiting experience. So that's one of the key distinguishing factors between the Brent Venables method and the method that was employed under Riley.
Yeah, I'm interested to see if they do the no unofficial visits during the month of June type deal or July. I can't remember which one it was that Clemson always kind of shut down and we're like, oh, we're not doing that. We're going to spend time with our families, this, that, and the other type of deal. I can't imagine Venables doing that year one. I think probably not even year 2. I think after your couple of years of kind of grinding it out and you kind of have a feel and you've established your culture, you've established how you're going to recruit on a yearly basis, and you've made your mark and kind of built yourself up as this big time head coach at the collegiate level. I think then you can start we're not going to do these 2 weeks of recruiting. Like, we're done. We're going to go vacation and whatnot. So, and I think you have to. If you don't, you're going to lose coaches. I think that's essentially how this works. I mean, you got to give them family time. You've got to give them time to themselves to rejuvenate. And they did that again this weekend. They went out to the Sooners in the desert, met with the donors, hung out, watched some softball, and then they flew to Vegas and hung out in Vegas, I think at DeMarco Murray's house, from what I've heard from a couple of recruits that were getting phone calls from the coaches in Vegas. So I think they're doing a lot of communion together. I think that's essential. If we're going to keep the staff together, you've got to communion together. You've got to, become friends. So I think this is just another big deal where Oklahoma is, moving in their own little direction under Brent Venables.
All right, let's hit some additional questions that we have from our listeners. So one would like to know, once OU lands a 5-star, do you think that will open the floodgates to more 4 and 5 stars? And who could that guy be? Lebbeus Overton, David Hicks, David Stone. Who might that player be?
Well, the first one would be David Stone. If I was going to guess, would be, the first one I would think would go off the books. But that's just me guessing. If everybody's seen his Twitter, I think it's pretty evident. You scroll through it. It's a while that you don't see anything OU related on it, by the way. I think Derek LeBlanc's being vastly overlooked here. I'm not ready to put in a crystal ball for him, but at the same time, how many players visit a school at the end of January and spend 3 or 4 days there, right? Then turn around a month and a half later and spend another 3 or 4 days. His dad told me they're flying in on the 24th and leaving in the morning of the 24th, mind you, and leaving on the 28th.
Maybe he's just a big Brahms guy.
I don't know. Maybe, I don't know. He's big in the Sam Noble Museum. He wants to go revisit that again a couple of times. He likes the Omniplex.
Interesting.
Kirkpatrick Center. He wants to go ride the Bricktown boats a couple more times. learn about the history of downtown Oklahoma City. I don't know.
Yeah, I do think Oklahoma's in a really good spot for David Hicks, and that's nothing new necessarily, but it is something I'm gaining confidence in. I do think, though, that Lebbeus Overton's ultimate decision could have something of an impact on David Hicks' eventual landing spot. I'm not necessarily suggesting they're a package deal because I don't think that's the case. But I would say if Lebbeus Overton ends up a Sooner, that bodes well for OU's chances with David Hicks. If he ends up an Aggie, that certainly bodes well for the Aggies' chances as well. Again, don't read too much into that. They're not a package deal, and I'm not saying they both end up in the same place, but David Hicks has said that Lebbeus Overton is a guy that he'd like to play with if possible. And given that both of those recruitments have really narrowed the focus to Oklahoma and Texas A&M, something to be mindful of.
How many 5 stars can A&M have? Eventually, these dudes are just going to leave, right? Like, there's going to be a lot of transfers out of Texas A&M at some point. Because you can only play, 3, 4 at the most at one time. And they've got like 20 in the last 3 years. Like, I mean, it doesn't add up to me. Like, if you were Lebbeus Overton or David Hicks, and mind you, I do not care where these guys go. I just want to say that the numbers don't make sense. Like, I get it. The nice shiny thing right now is Texas A&M. They're the hot program that kids are migrating to, right? But at what point do you sit there and go, dude, there are so many people there on their defensive front. And they're all from 2020, 2021, and 2022. So you know what that tells me? They're all young. And some of them have extra years thanks to the COVID. So to me, it just doesn't, a lot of this doesn't add up. And that's why I'm like, dude, do you really want to go to a place where you're just going to have to like wait your turn over and over and over and over? That's great at the Alabamas of the world. That's great at Georgia. That's great at, LSU at times. It's great at Oklahoma at times when they're doing that. But you want to know why those schools can get away with it? Clemson. Do you want to know why they can get away with it? They win titles.
They're winning titles.
Correct. At what point going 9-3, 8-4, and you're sitting behind somebody and you're like, what the hell, man? I maybe could have won this game. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
That's got to start making sense at some point.
Well, and I think that's the reason why A&M so desperately needs to be good in the year 2022.
Oh, they do.
Because the crux of their recruiting pitch at the moment, their claim to exclusivity in a sense, is the fact that they are the lone program from the state of Texas that plays in the SEC. And once you factor Oklahoma and Texas into the equation, in the new SEC, A&M's recruiting edge in that sense vanishes. And all of the same battles that they once had on the trail with the Sooners and the Longhorns in the Big 12, they're once again going to end up on the losing end of things unless they can start to have that nationally recognized success where they're at least playing for an SEC championship,
right?
Making a college football playoff appearance. That's the kind of thing that A&M needs. If they can't get a conference title or at least play for one here in the next few years, that's a program that could be in trouble. And I know that's weird to say right now, just based on the fact that they have stability with Jimbo Fisher at the helm and the fact that they just brought in the greatest recruiting class of all time. But in bringing in the greatest recruiting class of all time, you also just put a ton of pressure on yourself, because right now you have a window of 3 to 4 years where you have the talent on your campus to do something really special. And if you don't do something really special, then that's going to reflect very poorly on you in the eyes of recruits who want to follow this myriad of elite talent that's made the journey to College Station to play for the Aggies.
No, and I get it. I get what you're saying, and I agree with everything you're saying. It's just, to me, again, I'm just, Jimbo Fisher's an amazing coach. Like, he's a really good coach. He's won titles. He won a title as an assistant at LSU. He's won a title as a head coach at Florida State. He's played for titles. He's been one of the best recruiters in the country. But he also pretty much deteriorated Florida State to what it is now, and they haven't been able to get out of that. So I guess what I'm saying is that when you if they do not, in the next 2 years, if they don't go 10-2, 11-1 in those years, there's going to be some backlash, I think, to all this, because of what you just noted. Texas and Oklahoma are going to join the party. And then what do? It's like you're in the Big 12 again. You're fighting against programs that have won vastly more than you throughout the years. So they're going to have that edge, because if you're battling head to head with Oklahoma right now and you're in the SEC, what's going to happen when you're both in the SEC? Like that is, it's going to be a lot harder to sit there and say, oh, you know what? Come play with us. It just means more where we're at. Well, it means more where they're at now too. And they've won a bunch of titles doing that. So I don't know. It's going to be interesting. I think somebody asked about Clayton Smith. Do we expect Clayton Smith to be a star when it's all said and done? Yeah, I do. I think he played really well in the bowl game. I was talking to somebody today about that, actually, and the person said, look, there's some growth that needs to be had there, physically, mentally, and that's to be expected. The good news for Clayton is that the bowl game was only his 4th game to touch the field. So the previous staff actually did him a favor by allowing him to be a redshirt freshman again this year and still have his freshman season, another freshman year, to have that growth. And I think within the next, it may not happen this year, but I think within the next 2 years, I think it's going to bode well. I was talking to the person I was talking to today said that they think Ethan Downs and Reggie Grimes and Lua are going to, and David Uwegbu, from the sounds of it, sounds like he may be moving to the edge, a defensive end spot. So
I wouldn't mind that at all.
I wouldn't either. That was something that was tried, that people tried to make happen last year, but things just didn't work out. I'll leave it at that. And he stayed at middle linebacker, and him moving to edge potentially, we're going to find out here in the next few weeks if that's legit. If he really is a defensive end, and you've got Ethan Downs, Reggie Grimes, Uwegbu, and Lua as your defensive ends, along with Stripling and Clayton Smith and all these other guys at the stand-up, that's pretty nasty. That's a nasty start as far as talent goes. And then you've obviously got Jalen Redmond, Corey Roberson, Joshua Ellison, and the list goes on and on and on. Kelvin Gilliam, guys that can be really dominant on the defensive front. So the cupboard isn't bare. The cupboard is not bare.
No, the cupboard is far from bare. And particularly when you look at the pieces that Oklahoma has added in the secondary, the likes of Trey Morrison, I believe is going to start at whatever position he wants, really. Yep. He's played corner, he's played nickel, he played safety. Yeah. You would figure safety is probably the most likely landing spot for him. But you add him to the fold. You bring in a guy that's really turned heads early on, and Walker comes June. You'll add CJ Colden, the outstanding transfer from Wyoming. Reinforcements, Brandon. Not to say that you're not confident in the guys you already have in the room, but there is absolutely nothing wrong with having quality depth. No. And that's what Oklahoma's going to have one way or another. They're going to have guys that are capable of starting that have to ride it out on the second string because there's going to be so much talent in that defensive backfield. So when you factor that in, combined with the fact that Oklahoma has this wealth of talent as well as depth within the front seven as well, you get the sense that Brent Venables' very first defense in Oklahoma is they're going to have the chance to be a pretty special unit.
They are. And I'm not saying that's going to happen. I was going to add to what you were saying right there was, go look, because somebody said something to me on Twitter today. They're like, man, it's really cool to see Oklahoma in on such big name targets now on the defensive side. And I was like, go look, 2017 to 2022. That's all Oklahoma's done over the last 4 years. They've recruited so well. That's why you started to see, even under Grinch, you started to see growth more and more and more on the defensive side. There's a dog barking in a room next to me at the Kempton here. Awesome. But that growth that you saw, the rankings, the defense got better and better and better. And it's going to continue to do that, especially when you add, like you said, Kenai Walker, Trey Morrison, Lua, Jeffrey Johnson. I mean, those are big-time guys that are going to be able to contribute day one on this defense. Then go look at the rankings. Go look at where the guys that are returning, where they were ranked on the 247 composite. You're talking 4- and 5-star guys for the most part across the board. So the talent's there. Now they just got to piece it together. And look, strong safety. The depth on the defensive side of the ball is actually better than the offensive side right now. When have we ever said that? Because you look, offensive line, they're still having to try to find pieces here. Wide receiver, they're trying to find somebody in the portal. They could take another person at the running back if they needed to. I mean, they need added depth at certain positions. You don't particularly need that on the defensive side of the ball. It's there. It's good enough that you're moving Dave Uwegbu from inside linebacker potentially to defensive end.
Which would make sense because Oklahoma just has a ton of inside linebackers.
Oh my gosh. And really good ones too.
Yeah. Deshaun White, Danny Stutzman. Sure. You bring in the true freshmen and Kobe McKenzie and Jaron Kanak. You have TD Roof coming in as a transfer. And then a guy that kind of gets lost in the conversation is Shane Witter but
Mm-hmm.
that's a player that from an athletic standpoint, he can be as good as any of them by the time it's all said and done. So I think that would make a lot of sense for David Ugwoegbu, just because in terms of his physical makeup, he's kind of an outlier right now among the inside linebacker group. He's the guy that most naturally translates to that edge position. And so I think a lot of it will depend on how confident Venables and his staff are in Clayton Smith and Marcus Stripling. And who knows, maybe Stripling's a stud or Smith is a stud in spring practice, and you don't feel the need,
and you don't need to move
Ugwoegbu there. But if you feel it's more conducive to Ugwoegbu's long-term success to shift him to edge as opposed to having him somewhere in the fray at inside linebacker, then I really like that move for Ugwoegbu, because he's done some nice things off the edge. That's a position that he's played a little bit in the past. You think back to an outstanding play that he made in Bedlam in 2020, where he deflected that pass and then came up with a diving interception. So he's been disruptive off the edge in the limited action that he's gotten there.
Look, people are also asking about, Cole Adams. There's nothing new there. I don't know when Oklahoma's going to offer him. I thought it would have already been done. Who knows? Maybe by March 1st, maybe by Wednesday, there is an offer. You would think by the 5th, there might be, even though he's going to be visiting Bama. You hope that happens, because the more these teams start to offer, you got LSU, Texas A&M, Alabama. Did Georgia offer yet? Cole Adams? Do not look at the sites.
No, they have not offered.
Okay. They don't need to. He's already got Alabama, LSU, Texas A&M, Tennessee, and a host of others that are, decent programs, last I heard. So at some point, Oklahoma's going to have to pull it off, and they're going to have to offer. It's almost inevitable at this point. It's just a matter of when, not if. Now, if they don't offer, that's going to be one of the head scratchers for me. It really is. I'm not going to understand it. And at a program like Owasso, I think you would do it just because. I mean, he's a good player if those programs are offering, number one. Number two, it's Owasso, and they're going to have 2 or 3 guys every year that could potentially be OU level guys. Do you really want to rub that program wrong? That's not something I would want to do.
Yeah, if they don't end up offering Cole Adams, it'll almost feel like Braylon Presley all over again. A kid that just dominates high school play within the state of Oklahoma, and anybody can watch him on Friday nights and conclude, okay, that's a dude that needs an offer from the University of Oklahoma, and for whatever reason, it just never comes. Now, I don't think that'll happen. I don't. I think if OU misses out on Cole Adams, it won't be for lack of trying. But you would hate to see that type of situation come to fruition again, especially with how bad Braylon Presley wanted that Oklahoma offer in particular. By the way, quick softball note: Jada Coleman just hit a walk-off 2-run homer to beat Tennessee 9-8 in 10 innings. So the softball team's still undefeated.
Miss Billy Bowman.
It's Billy Bowman. That's right.
with the homer. All right, nice.
And Taylor Robertson hit a buzzer beater 3-pointer to beat Kansas State for the women's basketball team. So
goodness.
Several walk-offs. I don't know if you can really categorize Marvin Johnson's layup and subsequent steal as a walk-off today, but very thrilling day of victory for Oklahoma athletics. Overtime victory in men's basketball, buzzer beating victory in women's basketball, and extra innings victory in softball.
OU fans are probably hoping, for kind of a cherry on the icing on the cake there to have a commitment pop. Probably wouldn't hurt. just to end the weekend on a good note. Speaking of, I'm working on I don't know. I'm going to try to work on some of it tonight and tomorrow, but I'm going to be super busy with the Under Armour game, or the Under Armour camp, out here in Atlanta, and working that and interviews and whatnot. but I'm working on my first installment of the way too early 2023 class predictions that the fans on OU Inside, they love it. They love it when I do it. It's like the most clicked thing ever on our site when I do it. It's VIP, so it's behind a paywall, but our members, they love it, and it's like talked about, and it pisses the other fan bases off that I would even suggest that Johnny Smith isn't going to Arkansas and he's going to Oklahoma or whatnot. I mean, it's just
Johnny Smith sounds like he's going to BYU.
He's Mormon. I'll do Smith. All right. David Smith sounds like he's going to BYU. You see what I did there?
Right. I did.
It's not funny? All right. All right. Well, a little Mormon humor. Come on, they can do it on Broadway. Anyways, yeah, I guess it's going to do it. Do you have anything else that you have coming this week as far as like notes and whatnot?
I mean, obviously, the big thing is keep an eye out on OU Insider VIP for that full March 5th visitor list that we'll have posted here within the next 48 hours. And we'll be keeping close tabs on everybody that will be in Norman this coming weekend as we look forward to the dead period's conclusion on Tuesday morning. So that is the meal ticket for now, as well as Brandon's way too early class predictions, which I'm sure I will do an iteration of at some point as well. But there's plenty coming on OU Insider VIP.
And I'll have obviously my way too early, because it's February, barely going to be going into March, 9 months until the first 9.5 months, basically until the first National Signing Day in December. But that'll be my way too early predictions for 2023. I'll have the recap all week of Florida, finishing up Florida, and then my recap of Georgia, everything that's going on here, the Under Armour camp, all that. All week long, we're going to have VIP Nugget after VIP Nugget. The VIP Nugget, the weekly chat that I always do, will continue, and then I'll start a new one up sometime later on this week. And then obviously, like Parker said, Junior Day coverage, through the wall Junior Day coverage. I will be doing it at a basketball game for my son, and then having to turn around and drive down to Sherman, Texas for our first select 7-on-7 with C4. Obviously, Caden being the quarterback on their 10 or 11U team. So we'll have a busy Saturday and Sunday with all that going on. Parker will be there helping me cover that. So that is going to do it for us. I do want to, Peyton Bowen's been asked about twice on the chat. So real quickly, Peyton Bowen, Oklahoma is pushing for him. He's still solid to Notre Dame. I don't know if Oklahoma is going to be able to flip him, but I do think the longer he talks to Oklahoma and the more Jackson Arnold continues to kind of poke at him, his teammate, and, him visiting with Jackson Arnold every now and then, I think it becomes harder and harder for him to say no to OU. But at the end of the day, I'm not sure he flips. I'm just not. Like, he's just a different kid. Like, academics are very important to him, and Notre Dame is considered a very prestigious school. It's not that OU's not. It's just a matter of what somebody wants to major in, like Caden McDonald, the 4-star defensive lineman out here. He wants to do broadcast journalism. So Oklahoma is way up on his list because of the prestige of the Gaylord communication. Yep. So it's those type of things weigh in more than fans want to think about. So we'll see. I don't know what he wants to major, but that may be one of the deciding factors. So we'll see. But yeah, that's going to do it for the OU Insider Under the Visor YouTube Live. You can join OU Insider, 30% off right now, $75. I do believe we're doing a 50% off here pretty quick in the next few days. So pay attention to that on YouTube and Instagram and all that. If we do throw up that 50% off somewhere, come do it, because look, it goes from being $108 to 30% off for the $75 to actually being only like $46 at the end of the day. And I think that is a deal if you really want to do it and join us for the next year. You'll get all the coverage through spring, all junior days, the Champion Barbecue, the summer official visits, the spring official visits, the off-season team news. We're going to have Team Nuggets spring ball coverage. We're going to cover all the recruiting. I'll be out and about traveling all over the United States all spring and summer. Parker will be going to a bunch of 7-on-7 and camps with me as well. He'll be doing his coverage up in Kansas, Missouri, Nebraska, all that type of stuff. We'll have you guys covered wall to wall, east to west, East Coast to West Coast, Canadian border down to the Mexican border. We've got you covered. If OU's offering them or after them, we will be around them and have as much notes as we possibly can on them for you guys. And we will have the team covered as best as we possibly can, which is really good, actually. We've got a lot of connections that we'd like to bring the information to you guys as much as possible. So soon to be 50% off, but right now it's 30% off, $75, get you 1 year, or you can do $1 for the first month, $9.95 afterwards. That's going to do it for Parker Thune. My name is Brandon Drumm. Thank you all for tuning in for the OU Insider YouTube Live. You guys have a blessed night.